At 11:00 p.m. on November 14, 1942, the radar operators aboard the USS Washington tracked 9 Japanese warships moving stealthily through the black waters north of Guadalcanal. The enemy was invisible to the naked eye, but on the battleship's SG radar, each vessel appeared as a glowing green blip. For months, the crew had trained with this revolutionary technology, the SG surface search radar that could detect ships far beyond visual range, and the Mark III fire control radar that could lock, track, and compute firing solutions in total darkness. Together, they gave Washington the ability to fight blind, to kill what she could not see. Yet few in the Pacific Fleet believed a battleship could still win a modern naval engagement. Since Pearl Harbor, battleships had been relegated to escorting carriers and firing anti-aircraft guns. The doctrine was clear. They were obsolete. But that night, everything would change. For months, Admiral Chester Nimitz had kept the Navy's few surviving fast battleships, Washington and South Dakota, on a tight leash. But when the Marines on Guadalcanal were nearly overrun and Admiral Daniel Callahan's cruiser force was annihilated 3 nights earlier, Nimitz made a fateful decision. He ordered Admiral William Halsey to send in the battleships, alone. Rear Admiral Willis A. Ching Lee, an unassuming Kentuckian with thick glasses and a sharpshooter's precision, was chosen to command Task Force 64. The Washington, South Dakota, and 4 destroyers. The ships had never worked together before. Communications were incompatible. The destroyers were outgunned, and South Dakota's crew was green. Yet Lee had one advantage: radar, and the brilliance to use it better than anyone else. Tantridan, his force crept through Iron Bottom Sound, the graveyard of dozens of sunken ships. The men could still see oil slicks and debris from Callahan's disastrous battle. Intelligence warned that Admiral Kondo was coming with the battleship Kirishima, 4 heavy cruisers and destroyers armed with the deadly Long Lance torpedo. The Japanese were masters of night fighting, their lookouts trained to superhuman levels. But Lee had something they did not: radar vision. When Washington's operators detected the enemy 18,000 yards away, Lee faced a deadly choice: open fire and reveal his position, or hold and let the enemy commit. He chose to wait. As the range closed to 8,000 yards, he finally gave the order. At 2300 hours, Washington's 9 16-inch guns roared in unison, hurling tons of steel into the night. The first salvos missed narrowly, but moments later, the Japanese destroyer Ayanami was struck, exploding into flame. The sea erupted into chaos. South Dakota opened fire, and American destroyers charged ahead to launch torpedoes. But within minutes, South Dakota suffered a total electrical failure. Her lights went out, her radar died, and she became a glowing target. Japanese searchlights lit her up as Kirishima and 2 cruisers pounded her with 14 and 8-inch shells. She took 27 hits in 90 seconds, her decks shattered and burning. The destroyers fared even worse. Preston exploded and sank with 117 men. Walk broke in half after a torpedo strike. Benham lost her bow, and Gwynn was burning and crippled. Within 15 minutes, Lee's entire destroyer screen was destroyed or sinking. Only Washington remained fully operational. A single ship against 14 Japanese warships. Every textbook said to retreat. Instead, Lee advanced. Using radar, he slipped unseen behind the burning wrecks and charged straight into the Japanese battle line. At 8,400 yards, point-blank for 16-inch guns, Washington opened fire on Kirishima. Radar-directed salvos landed with devastating accuracy. 9 2,700-pound shells slammed into the Japanese battleship, tearing her open, jamming her rudder, and igniting massive fires. Her forward turret was obliterated, her engines wrecked, and she began circling helplessly. Washington's secondary guns joined in, raking her decks with 5-inch fire until she was a burning wreck. Within minutes, Kirishima was mortally wounded. Admiral Kondo's cruisers tried to retaliate, firing torpedoes and shells, but Lee's radar detected their every move. He maneuvered Washington clear, every torpedo missing by mere yards. By 1 a.m., Kirishima was sinking. Her crew sang the Japanese national anthem before abandoning ship. At 3:20 a.m., she rolled over and disappeared beneath the waves. The first battleship sunk by another battleship in the Pacific War. Lee wanted to pursue, but with communications jammed and friendly PT boats preparing to attack anything that moved, he had to identify himself. "This is Ching Lee," he barked over the radio. "Get out of my way. I'm coming through." At dawn on November 15th, the scale of the victory became clear. Japanese transports attempting to reinforce Guadalcanal were caught in daylight by aircraft from Henderson Field. 7 were sunk, and thousands of soldiers drowned with their equipment. The Japanese effort to retake the island had failed. The cost was high: 3 American destroyers lost, South Dakota badly damaged, and over 400 sailors dead. Yet Washington emerged nearly unscathed. 1 minor hit, no deaths, and a decisive victory that turned the tide of the Guadalcanal campaign. Admiral Halsey hailed Lee's success as a glorious page in American naval history, but the Navy downplayed the event, labeling it defensive and ignoring the revolution it represented. Radar-directed gunnery had changed naval warfare forever. Lee's meticulous reports on radar tactics and night fighting were largely buried by bureaucrats still obsessed with carrier warfare. The Japanese, stunned that a single battleship had destroyed Kirishima and routed their fleet, realized that their night-fighting superiority was gone. Radar had made the darkness America's ally. Washington would go on to fight in nearly every major Pacific campaign. The Gilberts, Marshalls, Marianas, the Philippines, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, earning 13 battle stars. But she would never again face an enemy battleship in combat. The lessons of her victory off Guadalcanal were forgotten, overshadowed by carrier warfare. Admiral Lee continued to advocate for radar integration and independent battleship tactics, but the Navy moved on. When he died suddenly of a heart attack on August 25, 1945, just days after Japan's surrender, the man who had saved Guadalcanal and proven that a single ship, armed with technology and courage, could change the course of war, passed quietly into history. Yet, on that night in November 1942, in the dark waters of Iron Bottom Sound, Willis Lee and the Washington proved beyond doubt that the age of the battleship was not yet over. It had simply evolved.